They say love makes you blind. I used to think it was just a metaphor, a poetic exaggeration for the fools who gave too much, until I became the fool myself. My name is Yura, and once upon a time, I loved a man so much, I forgot to love myself. It wasn't always like that. In the beginning, we were a dreamy couple. Ethan, the man who lit up my world, the one who smiled at me from across the library table when we were both broke college students, scribbling down dreams in tattered notebooks. I remember thinking, he sees me. No one else had. Not really. He laughed at my jokes, brought me flowers from a nearby park, and told me I was his piece. That boy made me feel like I was enough. But time doesn't keep anyone gentle. We got married. I gave up my job to support his career, telling myself I'd go back to it when things settled. But things never really did. Ethan became distant slowly, then all at once. The man who once brought me sunflowers now forgot my birthday. He was always too busy, too tired, too important. Our apartment grew quiet, cold, and I held on tighter. I thought if I just loved him a little more, he'd come back. But he never did. Instead, he left for a business trip with her. Just work, he'd said, stuffing suits into a black leather bag, eyes avoiding mine. Her name was Lydia, his first love, the one who broke his heart back in college. I knew the moment I saw her name on his phone. The way he smiled at the screen, he never smiled at me like that anymore. Still, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just smiled and made him dinner every night while he was gone. I waited. I made sure the house stayed spotless, that he'd return to the warmth of a perfect home. I texted him pictures of my dinners, asking if he'd eaten. Sometimes he replied. Mostly, he didn't. And then, 3 weeks later, he came home. He looked happy, relaxed, as if those 3 weeks had cleansed something inside him. He didn't kiss me hello, just said, I'm tired, and collapsed onto the couch. He didn't even notice I'd cut my hair. That night, I lay beside him in bed, wide awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering why I felt so empty next to the man I once thought was my everything. Then came the night that broke me completely. I overheard him on the phone just outside the bathroom door. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. I was just walking past. But his words, cold and low, sank into my bones. She's harmless, pathetic even, still waiting for me like a puppy. I couldn't breathe. I stood frozen in the hallway, listening to the sound of my own heart shattering into pieces I could never piece back together. I cried myself to sleep that night. The next morning, I smiled and made him coffee. I kept pretending, because what else did I have? But inside, something had died, and a few weeks later, so did I. It wasn't dramatic. There was no accident, no crime. Just a quiet death of the soul. My body followed soon after. Some say it was illness. The doctors couldn't explain it. I think I died of being unloved. But fate is strange. When I opened my eyes again, it wasn't the hospital ceiling I saw. It was my old bedroom in my old apartment, years before I had married Ethan. First, I thought I was dreaming. Then I saw the calendar on the wall. I had gone back in time. I was reborn, and this time, I wasn't going to cling to anyone. This time I would choose myself. The first thing I felt wasn't joy. It was terror. I stared at the calendar again. May 10, 3 years before my wedding. I pinched my arm. It hurt. I opened my wardrobe and everything was exactly how I remembered it. The jeans I threw away years ago, the soft lavender sweater I loved but lost during a move. Was this a dream? But dreams didn't carry the weight of sorrow like this. My heart still held the ache of betrayal, of Ethan's words slicing me open. She's harmless. Pathetic. I closed my eyes. No, not this time. I had been given a second chance and I wasn't going to waste it mourning a man who didn't know my worth. The first thing I did, I blocked Ethan's number. No explanation. No drama. He wasn't even mine yet in this timeline, but I didn't care. I couldn't bear to hear his voice even now. Back then, we were only acquaintances in college. We had met briefly, had a few casual conversations, shared a class or two. He had just broken up with Lydia and was starting to show interest in me. I remembered the shy smiles, the way he offered to walk me home after night lectures. That was how it all began. But I wouldn't let it begin this time. So when he messaged me just like before I left him on read. When he asked if I wanted to grab coffee, I said I was busy, and when he showed up at the library, grinning like fate had given him a golden ticket, I looked him straight in the eye and said, "I don't think we should be friends." The confusion on his face was almost comical. Back in my first life, I would have apologized. I would worried about hurting him. But now, I owed him nothing. Instead, I walked away. Each step felt lighter, as if a chain had snapped from my ankle. The next few days were dizzying. I had knowledge of the future, what investments would boom, which companies would rise, even little things like which professor to avoid because of his hidden biases. But I wasn't here to play the lottery. I was here to rewrite my story. I focused on myself. I enrolled in an online course I had dropped back then, creative design. I always had a love for aesthetics, for telling stories visually, but I had pushed it aside to support Ethan's dreams. This time, I dove in. I started waking up early, reading, exercising, journaling, and slowly, I began to feel like I was meeting someone new in the mirror, someone stronger, more grounded. There were still moments when my past bled into the present, like the time I passed Ethan on campus, and he looked at me, puzzled, as if sensing something had changed. He didn't smile this time. Good. But then came the test I didn't see coming. Lydia. She hadn't returned yet in this timeline. Not until senior year. But one evening, while browsing through my old emails, I stumbled upon a name I didn't recognize. Kaiti Etsuye. In my old life, I never noticed him. But in this rebirth, I remembered a small, insignificant interaction at a university art exhibit. He'd complimented a piece I was standing near. That was it. I barely registered it, but now I remembered more. His steady presence, his quiet confidence, the way others respected him without him needing to demand it. In this life, I promised myself I wouldn't chase. So when I bumped into him again near the student CAF, and he said, "You're Euro, right? You gave a pretty savage presentation in class today." I only smiled and said, "I guess I'm just tired of staying quiet." He looked amused. I like that. I didn't feel the spark of love, not yet, but I felt seen, and that was enough. For now, my days started filling with purpose, not people. I wasn't waiting for anyone to love me. I was finally learning to love myself. And with each step forward, I left the girl who once clung to Ethan further and further behind. I wasn't her anymore. I was becoming someone Ethan would never recognize, and soon he'd regret that. The strangest part about being reborn wasn't waking up in a younger body. It was realizing that I still remembered everything. The taste of betrayal, the sting of silence, the way Ethan looked at me the night he returned from that business trip with her, Lydia, his first love, his real love. I remembered how I stood at the airport, bouquet in hand, waiting for the man I thought was mine, only to watch him step out, his jacket slung over Lydia's shoulders, laughing like I never existed. I remembered how I had clung to him even then, how I convinced myself it was just business, just friendship, just my insecurities. I remembered how I believed every lie because the truth hurt more. And I remember the day I stopped eating, the day I stopped sleeping, the day I stopped existing, just moving through life like a placeholder in someone else's love story. But not this time. This time, I had power. This time, I wouldn't beg for love. I watched from a distance as my younger self's life began to unfold. My friends hadn't grown distant yet. My parents still checked in regularly. My schedule was flexible. I wasn't trapped in a job I hated or a home where silence screamed louder than words. It was like finding my footing on a stage I knew too well, but with a new script. And I was the writer now. Instead of pouring my energy into people who drained me, I poured it into creation. I signed up for workshops I once said I was too busy for. I took photography walks in the early morning just to capture how the world woke up. I reconnected with a childhood friend, Emi, who in my past life had quietly faded away because I was too obsessed with Ethan to notice the friendship slipping. Emi cried when I surprised her with her favorite boba tea on her birthday this time. Yura, how do you remember these little things? I smiled, because the little things are everything. And for the first time, I meant it. I started journaling daily, not to vent but to listen to myself, my instincts, my boundaries, my dreams, and slowly, the pain from my other life started to alchemize into something useful. Wisdom. I could spot red flags now from a mile away. I saw how some people only texted when they needed something, how others never asked how I was doing, how Ethan back in this timeline, still just a casual friend, already showed signs of entitlement, of jealousy, of subtle control. So I distanced myself, and every time I chose to walk away instead of cling tighter, I felt something in me heal. One night, I lay on my bed, phone beside me, screen dark. No unread messages, no waiting, no anxiety, just peace. That's when it hit me. In my old life, I was always waiting, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be prioritized, waiting to matter. But now I wasn't waiting anymore. I was becoming. And if love came again, it would have to meet me where I was, because I would never go back to where I'd been. There's something freeing about being underestimated. One expected much from me, not in my past life, and not in this one. Back then, I was the sweet, agreeable girl, the one who always said yes, who smiled even when she was exhausted, who loved too easily and asked for nothing in return. But this time, I chose different. I started small, waking up at sunrise, running in the chilled air while everyone else was still sleeping. It cleared my mind, made me feel alive. I swapped processed snacks for food that nourished me. I deleted all the beauty accounts that made me feel like I was never enough, and followed ones that reminded me strength, confidence, and purpose were beautiful too. I cut my hair shorter, nothing drastic, but enough to feel like I was no longer holding onto the girl who waited on the couch night after night, the girl who died quietly. In class, I no longer shrank away when professors asked for opinions. I debated. I pushed back. I let my voice fill the room like I deserved to be there because I did. I saw Ethan from time to time. He'd changed to now just beginning to flirt, just beginning to take interest. I knew the signs. He'd sit a few rows behind me in class, hoping I'd turn. He'd hover near my seat at the library, asking random questions like he didn't know the answers already, but I never gave him the attention he craved. Once, he called out my name as I walked across the quad. I paused, turned slightly, and gave him a polite nod before walking away. The look on his face, that subtle mix of confusion and frustration, was delicious. In another timeline, I would rush toward their voice, heart pounding, cheeks blushing. But this time, I kept walking. Instead, I poured myself into my passion, design. I spent hours learning software, watching tutorials, experimenting with color theory and animation. I even opened a small freelance account under a pseudonym, offering logos and digital posters. Clients trickled in, strangers who didn't care what I looked like or how quiet I used to be. They only cared about my work. And for the first time in my life, I felt valuable, not because of someone else's love but because of my own. My bank account slowly grew. Nothing extravagant, but more than I'd ever had in college. I started saving for my future, laying the foundation for a business that, in my past life, I never had the courage to start. Kai noticed the change too. He was quiet, observant, never pushy. He started sitting next to me in class, offering insights during projects, asking me what I thought instead of telling me what to do. We'd walk out together sometimes. I liked the silences between us, comfortable, easy, no pressure, just mutual respect. He never flirted, never tried to impress, and somehow that made him even more intriguing. One day, after presenting a difficult project in front of a packed hall, I walked out flushed and tired. My hands were trembling slightly. I hadn't noticed until he gently handed me a water bottle and said, "You were incredible in there." That was it. No grand speech, no dramatic gestures, just quiet, steady presence. I wasn't in love. Not yet. I wasn't ready. But I was starting to trust myself again. The girl I was becoming, the one who said no, who held her head high, who created beauty with her own two hands, was someone I liked. I didn't need anyone to validate me anymore. Not Ethan, not even Kai, because the woman I was now, she was finally choosing herself, and there was no going back. They say people only notice what they had once it's gone. But I was never really his, was I? Still, it was strange seeing Ethan try. It began subtly. A message one evening. "Hey, haven't seen you around much. You okay?" In another life, that message would send me spinning with hope. I would stared at my phone, heart racing, crafting the perfect reply to sound casual but eager. But this time, I didn't reply at all. The next day, he approached me in the cafeteria, tray in hand, smile just a little too bright. "You're right. Mind if I join you?" I looked up from my notes. "Actually, I do." He blinked. I didn't smile, didn't soften the blow, just turned back to my food and flipped a page in my notebook. He walked away. After that, things escalated. He started showing up more, lingering near the design lab I worked in, accidentally running into me after lectures, complimenting my outfits in a way that felt performative, like he was trying on charm that didn't quite fit anymore. And each time I remained cool, distant, unshaken. He grew more intrigued. "Did I do something to offend you?" he asked one afternoon, after chasing me down the hall. You used to be really friendly. I turned to face him fully, meeting his eyes without blinking. No, I said. You just mistook my kindness for weakness, and I've outgrown both. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He didn't know what to say to a version of me he couldn't control. Back in my past life, Ethan always held the upper hand. He was the one pursued, the one forgiven, the one adored no matter how cold he became. But now the roles had reversed and he didn't know how to handle that. He wasn't used to being ignored. I'll admit it was satisfying to watch him squirm, but I wasn't doing it for revenge. I was doing it to protect the woman I was becoming. And that meant having boundaries even when they confused or upset people. Even when he tried to make me feel guilty. He once followed me outside the campus library, his voice softer this time, almost vulnerable. I just miss talking to you. I tilted my head. Funny. You didn't seem to miss me when you had my full attention. And I walked away. What stunned me most, though, was how peaceful I felt in a rush of guilt. No racing heartbeat, just clarity. I had no desire to punish him. He wasn't evil, just a man who took me for granted when I was willing to give everything without asking for anything back. But now I asked and demanded and said no, and every no I gave him made him want me more. Irony is cruel like that. Kai noticed the attention too. One afternoon, after class, he said lightly, "You know, he's not used to being ignored. It's driving him mad." I smiled. "Not my problem," Kai grinned. "You're different. In a good way." He paused, then added, "Most people change slowly. You're transforming." I met his eyes. Because I've already lived through the version where I didn't. We stood in silence for a moment, and I saw something flicker in his expression, curiosity, maybe, or understanding, as if he sensed there was more to my story, something deep and buried. But he didn't pry, and I was grateful for that. Let Ethan chase shadows of the girl he once thought he knew. I was no longer waiting for him. I was walking towards something better. Even if I didn't know what it was yet, I knew it wasn't him. The seasons changed quickly that year, just like me. By the time autumn arrived, leaves turned amber, sweaters replaced tank tops, and Ethan's attention became suffocating. But nothing could have prepared me for the return of her, Lydia. I saw her before anyone told me she was back. She was standing just outside the business department, hair loose in those perfect beachy waves, lips curled in that practiced, effortless smile. In my past life, I had always been so aware of her, the ghost in Ethan's heart, the what if that never quite disappeared, the woman he claimed was behind him, even as he shared our bed and whispered her name in his sleep. I hated her then, but now I felt nothing. Lydia spotted me before I could turn away. She walked over, confident and curious. "You're right," she said, like we were old friends. "Ethan's mentioned you." I raised an eyebrow. "Really? I barely speak to him." Her smile twitched, just slightly. We stood there for a second, both of us sizing the other up. She was beautiful, no doubt. The kind of beauty that turned heads in every hallway. But there was something hollow in her eyes, like she was always waiting for people to worship her, needing it. I'd been like that once. Just with Ethan? Not anymore. Anyway, she said lightly. Just wanted to say hi. I'm back for the semester. Maybe I'll see you around. Maybe, I replied, my voice flat. Or maybe not. And with that, I turned and walked away. It was a small thing, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I hadn't even known was missing. Later that day, I saw them together, Ethan and Lydia, walking side by side across campus, talking, laughing. The sight would have gutted me in my old life. Now it barely grazed me, but I could feel his eyes follow me when I passed by daughter, as if I were the one who had returned, as if I were the one whose absence now haunted him. A few days later, the bomb finally dropped. Ethan cornered me near the vending machines, his voice low. "Hey, can we talk?" I turned slowly, arms crossed. "About," he looked around, then back at me. "About us," I laughed. Not bitterly, not cruelly, just honestly. "There is no us, Ethan. There never was." "Not really," he frowned. "Why are you being like this? I know we weren't close, but I thought you thought I'd still be waiting." I interrupted. "You thought I'd be here, hoping, clinging, crying, like before." His face darkened. "Before?" I froze for a moment. Too much, too fast. I backtracked smoothly. "Before I learned better." He stared at me like I'd slapped him. "You've changed. I grew up." He looked away, scowling. "You're really going to let some random guy like Kai replace me?" And there it was. Jealousy. I tilted my head. "Replace you, Ethan? You were never irreplaceable." He opened his mouth, but I didn't let him speak. "You left me emotionally long before Lydia ever returned. And if you think I'm going to compete with your past or wait for your future, you don't know me at all." I walked away, again, and this time, I didn't look back. Later that evening, I ran into Kai in the student lounge. He was sitting on the couch, sketching something on his iPad. Without a word, he handed me a cup of hot cocoa. I took it gratefully and sank into the chair beside him. We sat in silence for a while. The kind of silence that doesn't need to be filled. Then he said, without looking up, "He doesn't deserve your fire." I turned to him. "And you don't even know the half of it." He looked at me then, eyes steady. "No, but I've seen enough." My heart fluttered. Not because he was charming or handsome or mysterious, but because he saw me. Not who I had been, not who I pretended to be. Me. And that, I realized, was something Ethan had never truly done. It was almost poetic, really. The event was supposed to be a celebration, an annual university gala for top achievers, alumni and donors. I wasn't planning to attend at all. Crowds weren't my thing anymore. But when Professor Lee personally handed me an invitation, praising my design work for the event's digital campaign, I couldn't say no. In my past life, I never even got nominated for the award I was about to receive. But this time, I was the one walking on stage. Funny how things change when you stop shrinking. The evening arrived, and I wore a navy blue gown that hugged my form just right, elegant, effortless. I tied my hair in a loose bun, soft tendrils framing my face. No flashy jewelry, no dramatic makeup. Just me, refined and radiant. I didn't dress to impress. But when I stepped into the ballroom, every head turned, including his. Ethan stood near the entrance, holding a champagne flute, Lydia beside him in a sparkling dress that screamed for attention. But his eyes were on me, and I didn't even flinch. "Wow," Kai said, approaching with a smile. "You look." I smirked, like someone who finally figured out who she is. He chuckled. "Exactly." He held out his arm and I took it. Together, we entered the room too, souls aligned in quiet confidence. During the ceremony, my name was announced for the Rising Design Innovator Award. I walked to the stage to a round of applause. Heart calm, spine straight. As I gave a short speech about failure, resilience and Rediscovery. I noticed Ethan in the audience, stiff, jaw tight. Lydia leaned toward him, whispering something, but he didn't respond, because I wasn't the invisible girl anymore. After the event, people gathered in clusters, networking, laughing, trading stories. I thanked professors, shook hands with donors, smiled politely at everyone, and then Ethan appeared. "Can we talk?" he asked quietly. I excused myself from the conversation and followed him a few steps away, careful not to give him more attention than necessary. "You were incredible tonight," he said, eyes scanning me like he didn't recognize me. "Thank you," I replied coolly. "I didn't know you were capable of this," he added. And there it was, his idea of a compliment, wrapped in condescension, laced with disbelief. I smiled faintly. "I was always capable. You just never looked close enough to see it." He flinched. "I've been thinking a lot lately," he continued, "about us, about what I missed." I paused. Let the silence fill the space between us. Then I said, "Ethan, you didn't just miss me. You dismissed me." He opened his mouth, but I held up a hand. "And now, I'm not someone you get to rediscover, because I've already moved on." He looked at me like I'd taken something from him, but I hadn't. I had only reclaimed what was mine all along. I turned to leave, but he called out one last time. "Is it Kai?" I faced him one last time. "It's me. It's always been me." And with that, I walked away. I returned to Kai's side, feeling no urge to explain. He looked at me, his voice low. "Everything okay?" "Perfect," I said. "Let's dance." And as he led me onto the floor, I realized that I hadn't just survived my past. I had rewritten it. Not with vengeance, but with grace. There's a strange silence that follows a public event, the kind that lingers even after the music fades and the lights dim. The kind where people start showing you who they really are, when they think no one else is watching. I had barely stepped off the dance floor that evening when I felt that magnetic tension. Not from Kai, who had been nothing but respectful and calm all night. No doubt it was Ethan. He was waiting near the entrance of the building, his jacket slung lazily over his shoulder, as if he hadn't just witnessed the girl he once overlooked become someone far out of reach. Our eyes met briefly, but I didn't stop. Not until he stepped in front of me. "Yura," he said, voice low. "Please, just a few minutes." Kai glanced at me as if to say, "You're cool." I nodded. "I'll find you after." As Kai left, I turned to Ethan, folding my arms. "Make it quick." He let out a breath. "I know I was a jerk before. I know I hurt you. And I don't expect you to forgive me overnight." But I raised an eyebrow. "Forgive you for what? We never even dated in this life." He blinked. Of course he didn't know. He couldn't. To him, this was all unfolding for the first time. But for me, I had already played this scene before in another timeline, in another body. "Yura, I'm serious," he said, stepping closer. "I've been thinking about you constantly. Ever since you started ignoring me. I didn't see it before, but now I can't stop." I stayed quiet, because I knew what this was. It wasn't love. It was the allure of what he couldn't have. "You've changed," he said. "You're confident, smart, beautiful. You walk into a room and it feels like everyone notices you." He swallowed. "I miss you." "No," I said calmly. "You miss the version of me who clung to you, who waited, who cried." His face twisted. "That's not fair." "Oh, but it is," I said, "because I remember what it was like to love you with everything I had. and be treated like an afterthought. He opened his mouth to speak, but I stepped forward, cutting him off with my voice soft but firm. I waited for your texts. I cooked for you when you didn't even notice I skipped meals. I smiled through every moment you made me feel small. And when you left for that trip with Lydia, his face paled. I tilted my head. You didn't just walk away from me. You erased me. There was silence. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his regret. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I just finally understand my worth. And it's not something you can recognize because you were never looking for someone like me. You were looking for someone who needed you more than she needed herself. He stepped back like the weight of my words had hit him straight in the chest. I'm sorry, he murmured. I didn't know. No, I said gently. You didn't care enough to find out, and just like that, he was behind me. A chapter closed, a past forgiven but never reopened. When I found Kai again, sitting outside beneath the string, lights wrapped around the trees, I felt the last remnants of my old self dissolve. He looked up, offering me a quiet smile. Everything good? He asked. I nodded. Everything's exactly where it should be. He didn't press for details. He just stood, held out his hand, and walked me home in silence. And in that silence, I felt something new grow. Not the desperate roots of love I once knew, but the soft, steady bloom of something real. Love, when it's real, doesn't rush in like a storm. It arrives like sunlight through the curtains, quiet, warm, patient. Kai was never the type to chase. He didn't shower me with grand gestures or clever lines. He never asked invasive questions or demanded answers I wasn't ready to give. Instead, he stayed, and somehow that meant more than anything. After the gala, our days fell into a comfortable rhythm. We started meeting more often at cafes, between classes, even after late studio sessions where we both stayed too long and forgot about the time. He began inviting me to his world, one that was full of calm order and creative chaos. I learned he was a part-time illustrator for indie graphic novels, something he never bragged about. He just did what he loved and let it speak for itself. Unlike Ethan, who wore his ambition like armor, Kai wore his passion like skin, natural and unpretentious. One night, as we sat on the rooftop of his apartment, sipping tea and watching the stars fade into city light, he looked at me, not through me, not past me, but at me. You ever feel like you're living a second life? He asked softly. I stiffened for a moment. It was too on the nose. Why do you ask? I said, keeping my voice steady. He shrugged, smiling faintly. I don't know. You just carry yourself like someone who's already survived a lot. Like you know how this story ends, but you're rewriting it anyway. For a second, I couldn't breathe. I had spent so long burying my secret, locking it away in a place no one could see. And yet here he was, standing on the edge of it without even trying. I guess I just got tired of being a background character in my own life, I finally said. He nodded. Then I hope you're writing yourself a better ending this time. I looked at him, heart hammering, and whispered, I'm not looking for an ending. Just peace, he smiled. Then let me be part of your peace, and something in me cracked open. Not because I needed him, but because I finally trusted myself enough to let someone good in. The contrast between Kai and Ethan became blinding. Ethan had made me feel like I was too much and never enough at the same time. Like I had to earn his love through sacrifice. But Kai, he made space for me. He listened. He remembered the smallest things, my favorite childhood book, my habit of humming when I was thinking, the way I took my tea, and he never tried to fix me. He just stood beside me while I fixed myself. That was love. One evening, after a quiet dinner and a slow walk back to my apartment, Kai paused beneath the flickering porch light. He looked nervous. "I don't want to rush anything," he said. "I just want to be where you feel safe." I looked at him, then stepped forward and rested my head lightly on his chest. His arms wrapped around me, warm and certain, and I realized this wasn't a rebound. This wasn't revenge. This was the reward for choosing myself, for walking away, for surviving, and for being brave enough to believe in love again, not the desperate kind I once knew, but the gentle kind I never thought I deserved. Time has a funny way of humbling those who believe they're untouchable. It started with whispers, just background noise at first. A failed pitch, a cancelled internship, a misunderstanding with one of the department heads. Ethan's perfect image had begun to crack. I wasn't watching him, not intentionally. But the world has a way of circling back what you no longer chase. And suddenly, everywhere I turned, there he was falling. The final blow came weeks later, when Lydia walked out on him. I heard about it through a mutual friend who loved drama a little too much. Lydia had been offered a job overseas, something Ethan couldn't match, couldn't follow, couldn't control. So she left, just like he left me. Poetic, isn't it? But this time, I felt nothing, not joy, not revenge, just quiet, because I had stopped caring about his story the moment I reclaimed my own. One afternoon, I was leaving the design studio when I saw him sitting alone on the campus steps. Hair unkempt, tie loose, that usual confident posture gone. He looked up, and for a moment we just stared at each other. Then, slowly, he stood. "Yura," he said, voice hoarse. "Can we talk?" I hesitated, then nodded. He sat back down, and I joined him carefully, like a stranger visiting an old ruin, unsure if the walls would collapse under memory. "I messed up," he said. I didn't respond. "I know you probably don't care anymore, but I need to say it." Still, I said nothing. "I treated you like a backup plan," he whispered. "Even when I didn't realize it, I did. I thought you'd always be there, always forgiving, always waiting." He swallowed hard. "I didn't appreciate you. Not really. I compared you to Lydia. I convinced myself she was the one, even when she wasn't beside me. And you." He looked at me, broken. "You were always there, until you weren't." I looked straight ahead, the wind brushing hair across my face. "You're right," I said. "I was always there, until I realized I didn't need to be." Silence. Then he asked the question he should never had to ask. "Is it too late?" I turned to him fully, this time with calm finality in my voice. "It was too late the moment you made me feel like I had to beg for scraps of your love." He winced. "But I'm not angry anymore," I added, "because you taught me something." He looked confused. "You taught me how not to love." That broke him. I stood, brushing the dust from my coat. "I hope you heal, Ethan. But I'm not part of your healing. I'm part of my own." And with that, I walked away, leaving behind not just a man, but a lifetime of pain I'd finally laid to rest. Back at my apartment, I found a message from Kai. "Meet me by the lakeside tonight. I have something for you." I smiled, because while one chapter had crumbled behind me, a new one was quietly waiting to begin. And this time, I wouldn't be the one chasing love. Love had finally caught up to me. The lake was calm that night, not a single ripple, just the soft glimmer of moonlight touching its surface like a blessing. I wrapped my coat tighter and walked toward the dock, where Kai stood with his hands tucked in his pockets, eyes lost in the reflection of stars. He turned when he heard my footsteps, and for a moment, neither of us spoke, because sometimes silence holds more truth than 1,000 words. "You came," he said softly. "I told you I would." He smiled gently, and then pulled something out from his bag, a small, hand-bound book. "I made this," he said, handing it to me. "It's not finished, but it's about a girl." I opened the first page. There she was, me, drawn in watercolor strokes and gentle ink, standing in front of a burning house, with a suitcase in hand. Page after page, I flipped through her story. The girl who once clung, who once cried, who once died quietly inside. And then I saw her reborn, cutting her hair, turning away, learning to run, learning to laugh again. It was my story. Every moment I thought no one had seen. He had. When I reached the last page, the girl stood at a crossroads, and beside her stood a boy, not pulling her, not leading her, just standing beside her, waiting. And under the final sketch were 5 words in Kai's familiar handwriting: "Let me walk with you." I looked up, and he was already watching me. "I know you're strong on your own," he said. "I know you don't need saving or fixing. And I'm not here to compete with ghosts. I just..." He paused, searching for the right words. "I just want to be there as you write the rest." My heart was loud in my chest, not from fear but from recognition. I had been loved before, but never like this. Never with patience. Never with space. Never with the kind of tenderness that asked for nothing but presence. I stepped forward and took his hand. "You already are," I whispered. We stood there for a while, the wind carrying the scent of autumn leaves around us. And I leaned into him, not because I was weak, not because I needed to be held up, but because I was finally strong enough to choose love that didn't ask me to shrink. In another life, I had waited for love that never returned. But in this one, I had become the version of myself that love couldn't help but find. People often ask, if you could go back, would you do it all over again? And for the longest time, my answer would have been no. No to the pain. No to the begging. No to the heartbreak that hollowed me out from the inside. But now, my answer is different. Because going back wasn't just about rewriting my love story. It was about rewriting me. In my first life, I thought strength meant staying, that love meant sacrifice, that if I just gave more, waited longer, loved harder, he would choose me. But love isn't a test. It's not a reward for suffering. True love doesn't need to be chased or clung to. It doesn't leave you waiting at the door or second-guessing your worth. It walks beside you, steady, quiet, unshakable. I didn't find that love in Ethan. I found it in myself first, in the silence of rebuilding, in the courage to say no, in the laughter that returned slowly, and the warmth that didn't depend on someone else's approval. And then came Kai. He didn't rescue me. He saw me, every flaw, every scar, every stubborn piece of me I thought no one could understand. He didn't ask me to forget the past. He just promised to be there for the future. Now, when I wake up, I don't check my phone for texts that never come. I make my own breakfast. I write. I design. I breathe. And I love not from emptiness, but from abundance. Oh, the girl I used to be, the one who cried quietly on the bathroom floor, who clung to a man who barely saw her. Thank you for surviving. You were never weak. You were just waiting for your chance to rise. And now I rise every day, not to prove him wrong, but to prove myself right. This is my second chance, and I chose me. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. If you watched till the end, please comment love so that we could understand you were with us till the end, as well as please let us know where are you watching from. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one. Spread love.